My name is George Cohen. I'm joined today by Owen, the Director of Operations of Safe Place International and previous manager of Iman LGBT Centre. We're talking to Owen today just off Taksim Square. Owen, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to explain why we need an LGBT centre right here in Istanbul?
So, Turkey is home to approximately 4 million refugees. That's one of the higher estimates. 2 to 3 million of whom are Syrian. There's also African, Afghani, Pakistani. There's people from Central Asia. And so, working with those refugees, at first I was working with families, mostly from Syria, and realized that a lot of the LGBT members of the refugee community had very specific challenges, because in a lot of times they'd come from their country and they were with their family or without their family, but even within the refugee community they didn't quite feel like they could be themselves. They didn't feel safe.
Sure.
And in a country like Turkey, which compared to Syria, Afghanistan, Iran is somewhat more open to LGBT, they really felt like they wanted to express themselves and be themselves. I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah, of course.
And
so, I mean, basically, a lot of the people who are staying at your shelter, they're coming in from another country, and they're finding it hard to settle into Istanbul, into Turkey. So, you provide a shelter for them to stay.
Yeah, so many people, they're coming in and they'd often be living with other refugees or with their families if they all fled together. And to come out as LGBT put them in danger, especially for trans people. And so their number one issue has been finding safe housing, since they are often discriminated against by the Turkish community. The refugee community, let's say straight refugee community, may not accept their preferences.
Sure.
And then if they're visibly trans, or if they don't speak the language, or if they, for whatever other reason they're seen as foreign, it can be very hard for them to find housing. A lot of landlords won't take refugee tenants, or they just don't know where to start looking for a house, or how to communicate, how to get a job, how to pay for a house.
I see. So they're quite disadvantaged. Not only are they refugees, but they're dealing with discrimination because of their sexuality as well.
Right.
So, say the average person who was staying at your house, how did they get through to you? How did they reach out to you?
So I often get a question which is something like, how do you find LGBT refugees? Because in the media and in our discourse, we think of refugees as Muslim, as conservative, as generally as young men or families.
Sure.
We don't often think of LGBT populations. And first contact with LGBT refugees came because I was interviewing a family. I was doing an intake interview with a family who had an older son. And during the interview, he pulled me aside and he said, I want to talk to you. Can we talk in private? He said, I'm gay. Can you take me away from here? Can you take me to America?
Wow.
And he was probably the first. It was the first time I'd actually thought about the intersection of LGBT and refugee rights.
Sure.
And of course, it was kind of, I didn't know what to say. I can't take you away, and also we're serving your family. They're part of the community. If we took you out of your family, then we would be. How would that reflect on us? But experiences like that kept happening, and when people realized that I was someone who was passionate about LGBT rights, LGBT people started reaching out to me. And my question became not how do I find LGBT refugees, but like how is this not known? How is it not known that, of course, it's not, we don't know what percentage of the population is LGBT, but say it's 1%. If there's 4 million refugees, then what is that? Is that 40,000, 400,000 LGBT?
And usually dealing with very conservative families and an increasingly conservative Turkey.
Exactly.
You've taken part in protests for human rights here in Turkey, in initiatives for the human rights. How have things in Turkey, in Istanbul, been changing as regards LGBT rights? Do you feel there is a shift?
And so when I first came in 2010, there were gay bars operating in Taksim. There was a lot of LGBT safe spaces. The refugee crisis had not yet begun. Um, there were pride marches every year. And after the Gezi Park protests in 2013, the government really started to become much more conservative. They banned the marches. They really put a lot of restrictions on the LGBT movement. They've banned LGBT film showings, for example. Um, and so things have become much more dangerous. And with that, the murder of trans people, or violence against trans people in particular, was always a problem in Turkey, and has just become even more of a problem because people feel like they can't speak out or go to the police. When you have refugees who maybe have an irregular legal status, they don't feel comfortable going to the police. So there's lots of unreported violence and unreported discrimination that goes.
It's a gigantic shift. I mean, if you think the being gay was legal ever since the Ottoman Empire, so now that this is changing, and not so slowly either, it's quite a huge shift. So members of the LGBT community here in Istanbul, I mean, are they getting scared? Are they getting anxious about this? I mean, clearly they feel that they can't express themselves the way they used to, that they have to hide a bit more. Is that true?
So I'd say, like, just to give credit to the LGBT activists in Turkey, a lot of them have remained proud and remained out and remained fighting for their causes. But, it's become more complicated, and they fought for a lot of the older activists that I know, they've been fighting for their rights since the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and they were seeing things slowly move forward. And I think it's been really disappointing for them to see things move backward. Sure. And I've seen that be very, very scary for them to go back to the days when they risked being killed by their families in Turkey, to a time when it was relatively safe for LGBT in Turkey, to starting to move back into a mindset of banning it.
Sure. Do you feel that clearly Erdogan, is it Erdogan how you pronounce it? Erdogan, apologies. Erdogan has brought in big changes with his politics, kind of a more of an anti-secular mindset. Do you feel that it's becoming more reflective in regular people in Istanbul, that there's prejudice towards members of the LGBT community, but do you see people be more outspoken against gay people here in Istanbul?
Yes, especially in Beyoğlu. So Beyoğlu, which is where we are now, where Taksim is historically one of the more forward-thinking districts of Istanbul. Even during the Ottoman Empire, it was a place where most of the foreigners lived, and it continues to be a place where many foreigners live. Yeah. And so, when I came in 2010, 2011, up until 2016, there were gay nightclubs, gay bars, which also mixed with the leftist movement. So there was more of a, hippie, gay atmosphere.
I see, yeah.
And they closed a lot of that down. And there have been, in the last few years, attacks on things like art galleries, film showings, not just LGBT ones, but any place where there was alcohol, where there were, women who were dressed in a way that didn't suit their Islamic ideal. Sure, yeah. Or, so you've had attacks. There was a Radiohead listening party, for example, when their last album came out, that got attacked by Islamists because people were drinking wine in the record store. And so I think that, especially after the coup, people have felt emboldened to more openly attack people who are different, whether they be LGBT or secular, or even metalheads and goths have been
really, yeah. Okay, so I mean, the coup, it was, a lot of people see it as a win for democracy, which in ways it was. It was fought and stopped, but since then, I suppose there have been quite a number of changes brought in that have made it more dangerous to be to be open, or how have you felt any of this yourself? Have you seen it in your campaign for human rights?
So in the last year, especially, Well, it's interesting the AKP's politics toward refugees in particular, because in some ways, you know, the influx of a population that comes from a more conservative country that whose values are more aligned with that party's platform
Sure.
has been welcome for them, because it's added to their potential voter base. They've actually granted citizenship to some Syrian refugees. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, that
Yeah.
there is now a path to citizenship for Syrian refugees. Um, However, this has also led to, essentially an engineering of the politics of the country to cut the traditionally secular political class and social classes out of domestic
I
politics,
see. Yeah.
and lead the country into more of this, the AKP's moderate Islam uh, platform.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, so that's had its effects in that foreign NGOs have been closed down, and there's a lot of paranoia about spies and about
Yeah.
foreign influence, and the country Turkey has shifted its alliances a number of times. It was anti-Russia, it was pro-Russia, it's anti-Russia, it's pro-Russia again now.
Sure. Sure.
It's been pro-US, anti-US, pro-US, close to NATO, distant from NATO, thinking about leaving NATO, joining with NATO, and refugee politics have gone the same way. While they welcomed a lot of these refugees and have been in some ways granting citizenship or they came up with a good system of registration. Um, at the same time, they then put travel restrictions on refugees where they couldn't move between cities. They had to get police permission, and then they stopped issuing police permission. They invaded northern Syria. They invaded Afrin. So then all Syrians became suspect, because now Turkey's at war with Syria.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And so as the politics have changed, it's very much changed the attitude of the government and the officials toward the refugees and the people living here, as well as foreigners, as well as people working in journalism.
Yes.
All these sectors of society have been affected.
So it's quite a muddled uh, campaign they have. They're quite confused about their alliances and what they want to do. So going back to the shelter, you have at the moment you have about 20 people staying there. Do you feel that it's a good life form for a lot of people to that they would be in danger otherwise if they didn't have the shelter to go to?
Yeah, so we are helping a lot of people who have escaped from violence or escaped from imminent threats of violence. People who didn't have language skills or didn't know how to, it's not, while there is a system, while there is a system in place for refugees and a way of becoming integrated into the society, the path is not always clear, especially if you don't speak the language.
Sure.
And so people who've had trouble finding housing or escaping from threats of violence have been able to come to us, stay with us. We support them. We also help them get legal support, psychosocial support. So a lot of them are dealing with PTSD or mental illness. We've been able to help them get support, as well as providing language classes in English and in Turkish, helping them get registered with the UNHCR, which has resulted in about half of our residents that we've had. So far, about 20 people, I want to say, have gone to Western Europe and been resettled in Germany, the Netherlands, France, the UK.
After
staying
being
in
in
the
your shelter.
shelter,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
And so we've provided them with a safe place and a way of integrating in a way, and guided them sort of through the bureaucracy of registering so that they can claim asylum somewhere else. Turkey's not considered a safe country for LGBT by the UNHCR.
Yeah.
So LGBT asylum cases actually get expedited, so they tend to leave the country within 6 months to a year after application, whereas for other Syrians, most of them do not get resettled.
I see.
Because Turkey's considered a safe country for Syrians. I would actually
Sure.
agree with that evaluation.
So it's clearly invaluable process to get
Yeah.
people relocated or to guide them
Yeah.
on
Either to help them find something here, a sustainable solution for themselves here, a way of integrating into society, or to help them move to another country if need be, and get started on integration there. So we've had German classes, French classes, English classes to help people who were preparing to move to one of those countries.
And you are relying on volunteers?
Yeah, so
to
we have
come and
one
teach?
full-time staff member who's the project manager, and then we have a group of about 7 volunteers, plus some volunteer English teachers, probably about 15 people in the extended network of who are providing services for the shelter.
Wow. So I see on your Facebook page there you do a lot of outreaching for certain things like kitchen utensils,
Mm-hmm.
certain things that people need to live,
Mm-hmm.
basically. I mean, does that work for you? Do you get a lot of feedback from that and a lot of people volunteering their services or even appliances they're
Mm-hmm.
not using?
Yeah, Istanbul's a big city. There's a lot of foreigners living here as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people moving in and out constantly, and so there's been a number of times that people have been moving from Turkey to somewhere else, and they have an apartment full of stuff, and they say, "Hey, come to my apartment and take what you need," and
Wow.
we've been really grateful for that.
And you do a lot of fundraisers and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of
Yeah.
nights like that?
So we have, we're tied into other communities of NGOs, the Syrian refugee community, and there's a lot of community events that we take part in and that we host sometimes.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of people in our shelter who offer, Arabic classes at Arabic nights, and the band Country for Syria that I also play, and we do some solidarity events with the shelter just to raise money. Um,
That was combining two different types of music. Is that right? Country
yeah.
music and
So Country for Syria combines country music and Arabic music, sort of to draw parallels between the Syrian Civil War and the American Civil War,
Right.
which is where country music comes out of, as well as create solidarity because Syrians are often viewed as quote unquote exotic or
Sure.
oriental or of
Yeah.
a culture that's not relatable. So we take this very an important element of culture, music, and we draw a very clear comparison and show that those types of music integrate with each other.
It sounds like an
They work
amazing
together.
hybrid of music, like amazing juxtaposition
You're
of
welcome
two
to go. On
different sounds.
Saturday we have a concert if you're around, so you're welcome
Really?
to come out.
Oh, great! Do you have a concert here in
In
Istanbul?
Taksim, yeah.
Oh, very good. Very good. I'll have a look at that. And so you're expecting a big crowd at this concert?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Just one more question. With the growing changes in Istanbul, especially considering the LGBT community, what do you feel yourself? Do you feel it's going to be an upward struggle to shelter people, to let people feel they're safe here?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that members of the LGBT community will stop coming to Istanbul, stop coming to Turkey? Could you reflect a bit on how you feel it's going to change?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it depends on the politics of the Syrian civil war, as well as the changing politics in the region. There's an election in Turkey in 2019, and as you probably know, you never know what politicians are going to
Of
do
course.
in the run up to an election or to gain votes. The more that the government plays up nationalism to try and get nationalist voters, the less safe that refugees in general are. The more that they play up the Islamic element of their platform, the less safe LGBT are.
Sure.
So pretty much either way that it goes, it puts our residents in more danger.
I see. So it's going to be you're going to be kept busy here in OS in your shelter, and you have a number of shelters. Did you say you have a shelter in Greece?
Yeah, so we have a shelter in Lesbos in Greece, as well as a shelter in Athens called Athens Housing Collective, and there we house another 18 LGBT refugees. Situation in Greece is of course totally different from that
Yeah.
in Turkey. We're also looking at starting a shelter project in Beirut. I was there the last month working on that project, which we hope to start in June or July. And then we've also got projects in the works in Ecuador, India, and Bangladesh. I'm heading to Bangladesh at the end of the month to
Oh, wow.
get started on a project there. And yeah, I mean, everything's very different in each country. The situation is totally different. And so while we try to take aspects of our model and best practices to each place, we also
Yeah.
try to take the local situation on the ground into
Sure. I mean, each country's a learning experience as regards
Yeah,
how to implement
Mhm.
these shelters, I imagine. Okay, Owen, well, it's been an absolute pleasure for talking to you. Thank you for letting us know more about the Iman. How's it?
Aman.
Aman
Mhm.
LGBT.
It means safety in Arabic, Turkish, and Farsi. So
Ah, I
it's
see.
a word that goes between all three languages. They also
Okay.
use it in Greek a little bit.
Yeah, so it's safety. Wonderful. Listen, Owen, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Appreciate that.